here. Desktop 1, I guess. Oh no, I have to. Hold on, sorry, my Mac is preventing it from sharing. Give me 1 second, I have to do this. Go. Okay, it's making me restart Zoom to go to share. Can I just have 1 minute?
Of
Sure,
course.
sure.
Okay, sorry about that.
Meg, you sent me a note saying you can't meet at 3, so let's do it. Let's get together. Looks like I'm going to be driving home tomorrow. Maybe Sunday morning or Saturday evening. Sunday morning I prefer.
Yeah, I would prefer that too. And
All
we can just jump on a Zoom. I'll send you a Zoom invite.
Yeah, for sometime Sunday morning. Okay.
Okay, I think we're all set here. Let me go back to my, there we go.
We can see the whole deck of slides on the left, on our left now. So
How's this? Can you still see this? Is this better?
that's it.
Okay, all right. Okay then. Can I just go in or should I wait for?
Go ahead.
Okay, so whoops. Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Nick Mancini. I chose to do my research on gunsmithing, basically a short exploration into firearms and the field of firearms. I'll be going through basically how a firearm functions, into the specific functions of the parts and how they work in tandem with each other. And I also have a few videos, one showing the disassembly of the firearm as well as the reassembly of one, to show how to get to the parts. Here's my workbench, which I use in my basement, just to show that it doesn't take too much to get started in the field. All I had was this old pool table and a few cheap screwdrivers and some hammers, although I didn't have to use the hammers, thankfully, for this specific build. I chose the build for this one to be my Mossberg 590 shotgun, which is a very popular model of Mossberg shotguns. And this is the full disassembly with the frame on the bottom here. And I'm just going to quickly go through the parts, sort of what they do. So starting from the top left, we have the ring mount, which is attached to our barrel. And the back of the barrel is known as the chamber, which locks into our receiver here, the top of that. And the ring mounts, what they do is they lie on the magazine tube, and this is what holds the barrel onto the magazine tube, as well as our forearm, which is what gives us the pumping action. So what happens is your forearm goes inside, just under the magazine tube. Our action bars here on the end of the forearm are what hook into it, and then we put the ring mounts in and lay the the barrel right on top with the chamber sliding into our receiver. And that's what gives us the pumping motion for the pump action. On the top right here, this whole section of parts, these all go inside our receiver, or I guess more accurately, the frame, or the action. So these parts are also pretty simple. So we have these two parts which work in tandem, which is the cartridge stop, which basically what happens is when you load in the shell into the mag tube and you take one shell out, what's happening is it's making sure that other shells do not feed in, or that it slides out of the mag tube when you're not ready to load the next round in. And then the interrupter assembly also aids in this process. What that does is after you load a shell into our chamber, it prevents the slide from moving back again, so that you don't accidentally release the shell out of the ejector, and it makes sure that it stays in place until you fire. And then we have these two parts here. So we have the slide and the bolt. And the slide goes on top of the bolt, and it usually covers this spring part here. I know it's a little hard to see. We'll go more into the bolt later, but basically the slide, all it does is it covers the spring and keeps the bolt in place so that when you're sliding that forearm back and forth, what you're doing is making sure that the bolt doesn't move out of place and it always carries the shell into the chamber. And then our last part here is the elevator. So the elevator, all that does is it makes it so that when you cock the forearm backwards, the elevator lowers, and that way the shell can be pushed into it. And then when you push the forearm forward again, the elevator gets pushed up by our action bars here. And that's what puts it right in front of the bolt, and the bolt drives it into the chamber. And then we have a few more parts here on the stock, notably just the comb, which is the top part of the stock. And that's what you lay your cheek on to assist you with aiming. And we have the butt of the stock, which has a recoil pad on it, usually made of rubber. And basically that's what you press against your shoulder or your chest, depending on how you like to fire it. And that's supposed to dampen the recoil for the shooter, so it's not as painful after you fire the weapon. Up here in the box, we also have the trigger and the retainer assembly, which is a pin that holds the trigger in place, and our mag cap. But we'll get more into that a little bit later too. So now I'm just going to show you this quick video. This is me just doing a quick disassembly of the shotgun. And hopefully if I put it in full screen, it doesn't ruin anything. Can you guys still see this?
Yep.
Okay, so basically the first part there, I'm just taking off that mag cap. All that does is it holds our ring in place. So basically as soon as we take that off, we are freeing the barrel. And as soon as you knock back the forearm, the barrel slides right out once you push it forward again. And so here is our trigger retainer assembly. So all you do for this is you push it out. I use a flathead screwdriver here. It's completely blunt. Any other plastic object will work for this, but the screwdriver is pretty useful. Then you just pull it out from the other side. That releases our trigger. It pops right out. And then for our next part here, we have our two bars, the cartridge stop and the assembly bar. They slide right out. No tools required. And then we drive our forearm back. And what's going to happen is those action bars are going to dislodge the slide when we push it forward again. So the slide gets dislodged. It allows us to take the forearm apart. And our slide will also be laying there. You can just pull it right out. And that'll expose the bolt. Then the next part, we simply pull the bolt out. And the elevator has to be pushed in with your fingers to dislodge it, these two nuts here, from the holes. And now it is fully disassembled. Oh, sorry about that. It's playing again. Sorry about that. The next part, I wanted to talk about these three big ones is what I call them. So this is pretty much, these parts are what make the entire thing fire, the actual shell. So what we have here on the left is the trigger. So the trigger is a very simple mechanism. Basically, you have this top part here, which is the hammer. It looks like a little finger, but that's the hammer. And every time you charge back the forearm, what's happening is as you do that, it's loading the shell, but it's also priming our hammer by pushing it backwards and locking into that position. And then as soon as you pull the trigger, the bolt's already in a forward position waiting for the hammer to strike it. So what happens is you hit the trigger, it releases it, and it swings, and it taps the back of the bolt. And our spring obviously will carry the energy, and then it will hit our firing pin. Our firing pin in this middle picture here is, it's really small and it's dark, so it's hard to see, but it is in there. And it's pretty much this very small metallic pin that's only function is to strike the primer, which is located inside of the cartridge or the shell of the ammunition that we're firing. And all it does is move back and forth, and it only ever moves forward as soon as our hammer acts upon the back of the bolt. Otherwise, it just sits in there and rests. And that's supposed to prevent the shell from going off. When you load it into the chamber, you're moving it forward with force. So if this was exposed, that would cause the shell to go off immediately, which you don't want to do, because obviously you want to wait until you're aiming at something that you want to actually shoot before it goes off. And that's pretty much how these three parts function. This other part here I would like to note before we move on is the safety. It's this very small silver thing right behind the bolt. Basically what this does is it locks the trigger in place, so it makes it impossible to pull back to release the hammer. And that's really all it does. It's just making sure that even when it's loaded and ready to go, you have the safety on. It makes the trigger not move. So in case you're still not ready to fire yet, that will prevent a negligent discharge. And now we get into the last part, which is just simply the reassembly of the gun. A little more difficult, definitely takes more time than taking it apart, especially with some of these more finicky parts. I personally had a lot of trouble with the elevator, but in this shot, I get it down pretty quickly. Pretty much what's happening is you're pushing with your fingers again, lining up these little nuts here to go on to the holes, and then you slide the bolt right back in under the elevator. And this is a little finicky because without the slide, the bolt kind of jostles around inside of the receiver, but eventually you'll hear a little snap and it'll be in a more locked position, and eventually you can get it to move forward, or I guess backward inside the receiver. Our next part here, we're sliding the forearm back into place on the mag tube, and we have our action bars. We're trying to line those up with two holes. And the hard part about this one is these two loops here by my thumb. You'll notice they kind of get caught on a few of the insides of the receiver, as well as the hole. It does take a little bit of time for me to get this in there, but once you push them both upwards, it should slide in quite easily and should be more easily manipulable as soon as it's there. There it is. And we can see it appear right by the bolts right here. Next, for this part, what we're doing is we're sliding the bolt a bit forward, and we're lining it up in sort of the middle of the receiver. And here we have our slide. We're going to just put it right back in on top of the spring on the bolt. And what we're trying to do here is we have these little notches. And basically, these notches are supposed to catch on our action bar for our forearm. And that's important because without that, then we wouldn't be able to control the bolt by manipulating the forearm. And all of this is put back together. And it does take a little bit of time to get this into. It's a very loose part. We drive it backwards a little bit more. And that's to make way for our two other bars. And these ones, they just go right back in by plugging in. They're also very loose bars. These can be easily knocked out of place if you jostle the gun around too much. So you really want to keep it in this sort of upside down position. You don't want to try to like put it on its side, because then one will fall out. So you really have to do it like this. It takes a little bit of time, but as long as your slide's back, then you shouldn't have any trouble putting them in place. And then we lock it by putting the forearm forward. Now this part is pretty easy. It's the trigger. So the trigger, as you just saw, it slides right back in. But one part that I wanted to note about this is the safety. You see the safety actually can block the trigger from going back in properly. And if your safety is on during the assembly of this, it'll prevent the trigger from ever getting in place. So you want to make sure that the safety is off when you're putting the trigger back on. Otherwise, it'll just be sort of slamming into the trigger, sorry, not the trigger, the safety, and it'll never go in. And then we put the pin back in. This one's a little bit tough. You have to make sure you're lining up the trigger so that it is possible to feed through both holes. And once it clicks in, you might have to give it a bit more force, which we do here. And then it's good to go. And then we have this part where we put the forearm forward, and we're just going to make sure that our rings line back up with the mag. And once they're lined up, what you want to do is just wait for the click from pressing in, and there it is. And then we have the last part, which is where we put the mag cap back on, which secures our rings onto the magazine tube. And once you start hearing that sort of rattling noise, that's when you know it's done. And then what we do is we do a feeding test. So this is the very last test to make sure the gun's working. So the first test is you're sliding it back and you slide it forward. And that's just to make sure that nothing gets caught. I know the very first time I did this, what happened was the elevator actually got stuck on the bolt, and it would be at like a half-cocked position and it wasn't working. So sometimes you give it a little bit more force just to get things moving again after doing the first time reassembly. In this case, it does work on the first try, so you know that it's working. The next thing you do, you'll notice my finger move there. That's because I'm pressing the mag release button, or in this case, it'd be the action bar release button. So basically what that does is, like I said before, when you pump the first round into position in the chamber, it locks, the action bars are locked in place. That way you can't push it back and waste a round. So you have to hit the mag release button, or the action release button. And that allows you to empty out the chamber regardless of if there's a round inside there. And you want to make sure that button's working because it can be very important later on. And then we do a dry fire by just shooting. This is the live fire test. Basically, we're making sure that its elevator is picking up the shell. It's bringing it back up for the bolt to push forward to the chamber. We see it was a success. And we see that the ejector rods on the side of the gun push it back out once we use the release button. And then the very last test is the safety, which is right here. I put the safety on, trigger doesn't move, even though you might hear it. It's not moving because you can tell there's no click. The dry fire has a very predominant clicking sound that happens when the hammer strikes the back of the bolt. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you for your time. Are there any questions?
Do you want to go first, Meg?
Yeah, absolutely. So I found that really educational, Nick.
Thank you.
I quite honestly don't know anything about guns. So I thought that was really interesting, especially your use of actually those short videos, which I think your voiceover as you were going through it and taking it apart, I think was really instructional and helpful. So I guess my question would be, how much of this is information? Did you grow up learning about guns, or is this something that you learned during this presentation? I'm assuming no. I'm actually a little hopeful that you didn't just learn all this and are now firing a gun in 15 weeks, although I'm sure people learn faster than that. So that's my first question. So I'll let you answer that first, and then I've got another one.
So you are right. I didn't grow up with firearms. Actually, my family was actually very against firearms. It took a lot of convincing with my parents to let me buy my first one. And I did take a small safety course before I bought any of them. It was a quick 101 handgun course, just how to fire it, how to safely use one. And after that, I just got like a big passion for firearms. I found them very interesting. I found them fun to shoot. So I went ahead and I just did a little bit of research on my own. I found a class online by penfoster.com, which was all about gunsmithing. So I had taken that course a little bit before this semester. So I had a bit more information going in, but for taking apart a gun, so much as doing that and learning specifically how everything functions inside of it, what part all the parts play, that's all from this semester. I had to learn all of that and take it all apart. This is my first time ever disassembling a gun down to the frame, and I'm just thankful that I didn't need any specific tools for this gun. I was talking to someone at one of the local gun shops here, and I said, I want to take apart, I have a SIG MCX, which is like an AR-15 type build. And he's like, oh, you'll need an armorer's wrench, you'll need this, he's like, I'm like, well, how many of those parts or tools do you have here that I can use? And they were out due to a shortage. So I had to go with this because this one doesn't require as many specific armorer's tools. It requires, just some very basic screwdrivers and such. So I hope I answered your question. I might have ran with a bit at the end there.
No, that was nice context on your exposure and specifically what you did for this project. My other question is, so what could go wrong with reassembling your own gun. I guess that's as a parent and someone that was actually like the whole time you're putting it together, and then you put what I thought was a live bullet in.
It was a live round, and that's because I asked for snap caps, which are dud rounds, and they didn't have any of those. They were out of those too, so I had to use a live shell.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But so as you put that in there, I was like, oh my God, is he going to shoot the gun? So my question is, what could go wrong if you reassemble this incorrectly? Is the gun designed, and what, including your research, covered that? Is the gun designed, will it not shoot, or could it shoot incorrectly?
So yeah, that can depend on if the gun is damaged. So I mean, in terms of will the gun fire, out of nowhere if I put it together incorrectly, I would say for my research, the only chance of that happening is if we talked about the firing pin there that's residing inside the bolt. If that firing pin was more exposed to be outside of the bolt, it's very possible that as you do the feeding test, as soon as you push the forearm forward, that the firing pin could strike the primer in the shell, and then it could fire. Of course, it'll be firing wherever you're aiming, as long as the barrel is completely intact and there's no pitting or anything like that. But in terms of malfunctions in general, the only thing that you'd be looking at is failure to feed. You load the shotgun shell in, you push it back, the forearm back, and you push it forward, and it just doesn't grab the shell, in which case it's not dangerous, it's not going to fire, it's impossible to fire because there's no firing pin to cause the primer to ignite. But it will be annoying that it's not working. You'll have to take it apart and see where you went wrong. It's also possible, I think I said in the presentation, for the elevator to catch on the bolt, in which case it'll be stuck in a half cock position, and you'll have to use the release trigger to pull it back and then take it apart again to redo the elevator, most likely. But yeah, in terms of malfunctions, you're more looking at getting things stuck or things not feeding correctly, as opposed to a discharge of the firearm when putting it back together. Yeah.
Well, I do think in terms of safety, knowing the intricacies of how to take apart and put a gun together, probably just more information is probably good for you or anyone that's interested in using firearms to understand where things could go wrong. So I found that really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Nick. So I'm like Meg. I know nothing about guns. So I found that absolutely fascinating. However, if you ask me to replicate what I just saw, I would need to watch it several times before I would have a prayer of knowing what I was doing. So this is probably, I'm guessing that this is what we refer to in the orientation as a passion project. And we usually contrast passion projects with, although there's oftentimes overlap, with projects that are more geared towards, employment, or making the student employable after graduation. So my question is, am I right in thinking this is a passion project, or does this have something to do with where you want to end up as far as a career is concerned?
I think it just goes with what you just said of there's definitely a lot of overlap where, I liked doing this. I thought it was a very interesting project. I'm fascinated by the intricacies of firearms, but at the same time, a lot of gunsmiths, whether they're looking for apprentices or even just a salesperson, you need to have knowledge of the firearms and the industry in general before people would really consider hiring you in their shops. So I think that in knowing how a gun works, as far as employment for a gunsmith who does repairs, this is definitely going to help with employment if I can show them that here's my video of me doing this. I know how to take it apart, put it back together. I understand how the parts work, what they're supposed to do. I think it's definitely would definitely help with employment. Yeah.
Remind me what your concentrations are or were in size.
So I had a concentration with business, and I also had a concentration in criminal justice. Those were my two big ones, where I had a lot of criminal justice classes, business law, and then some accounting, finance stuff mixed in there with economics. So those are my main, concentrations. But towards the last year or year and a half, I've also had that gunsmithing class from Penn Foster, which is why I kind of incorporate that into my concentrations when people ask me about what I'm learning. But yeah, from RIT standpoint, mostly criminal justice and business.
So we do have a course on gunsmithing at RIT.
No.
Oh, so where did you take the course?
Penn Foster is a online course for gunsmithing,
okay.
right? Yeah, so that's outside of RIT. But when people ask me, "Oh, what are you doing for school? What are you learning?" I put that. I tell them I'm doing that as well.
I see.
So, is Penn Foster a gun brand?
No, that's just the name of the online school. They offer
okay.
other classes, but gunsmithing is what I have been learning from them.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
No problem.
What's the immediate next step for you in this domain? I mean, what do you do after you've figured out how to with this particular model? I assume the principles are probably all the same, I suppose, but I imagine the implementation of the principles is different depending on what model it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So what do you, if you want to go into this field, what do you do next? What's your next project, I guess?
So, I mean, you're right in saying, does it differ? Does the assembly and disassembly differ from brand to, type of gun? I'd say a lot of pump action shotguns work relatively the same, and a manufacturer might, do things a little differently. There's some tweaks in the actuator or the receiver there, but it does transfer from pump shotgun to pump shotgun. And in terms of what to do next, I was really hoping to get an apprenticeship after this semester and learn more about the different types of firearms. You have handguns, you have rifles, and shotguns, at the three basic, I guess, types of guns without going into any more detail. So I'd like to learn more about those too. And I'm hoping that one of the local shops will take me in as an apprentice. And if not, I can do it as go on as like a sales rep. And then hopefully I'm hoping, 5-10 years in the future, I can try to open up my own shop where I am also able to do the part that I like, which is, fixing them and taking them apart, learning about them. But yeah, I hope that answered your question.
So this reminds me, and we're going to have to switch to Feeza in a minute, but this reminds me of, a lot of the CAD students, the art and design students. They do a project which is calculated to go into, they do it because they want to enlarge their portfolio so that they can show it to potential employees. This is sort of a portfolio piece, right?
I get, yeah, you could say that. It's pretty much like that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. I really enjoyed it. It's certainly something that we haven't seen before. So thanks very much for that. And let's move on to Feeza's presentation.
Stop sharing. Okay, I think it's all set.
Hi guys, I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Sorry, I'm just nervous. Okay, so my name is Feeza Jafar, and my name is Feeza Jafar, and I'm majoring in biomedical science. So my topic for Capstone project is diabetes mellitus. So I'm doing research on this. So description of diabetes mellitus is that there are 3 kinds of diabetes. So first, in this the diagram is showing this one is healthy, like the pancreas, it's making the insulin, and the cell is detecting it, so it's accepting it. And then the type 1 is that the pancreas is destroyed, like it's not producing insulin. So it's like, which means the body is not making the insulin. So the type 2 is that the pancreas is producing insulin, but the cell is not detecting it, like not noting it, so it's producing over glucose. And then the type 3, that is just new, that is starting to just notice that it's very common for the woman during pregnancy. During pregnancy, because the body is producing too much insulin for the baby and for the mother. And for the ecology, the cause, the genetic factor, the type 1 is the inheriting pattern, which is unknown because it's complicated, because the insulin produced cells in your pancreas are destroyed by immune system. And these are the 3 genes that if from the blood test, if they noted these 3 genes, which means you have the risk of developing type 1. And then the type 2 is also inherited from family generation. Like if your parent, either mom or dad, or both of them, if they have a diabetes, then their children have a higher chance of getting diabetes too. And then also obesity, overweight, but it's complicated because it's hard to notice unless if they found any random blood glucose, which is measured. And then the lifestyle, the poor habit, for example, like drinking soda or any sugar drink that add the sugar, or skipping breakfast with disrupt insulin level and body sugar control, or eating at late night would cause blood sugar spike and disrupt your insulin, the process. And or emotional eating, like when people they feel sad or depressed, that lead them to overeating, and that cause weight gaining too. And then the fifth is being a night owl, like staying up late night, which disrupt your hormone that control blood glucose and hunger. Demographic, the gender, the men, they have a higher chance of having diabetes more than women. And for the frequency, my research is focused on US, so I focus on US. So there are about 34 million of adults they have diabetes. Both it includes both type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is common in children and adults, and type 2 is common in adults. And then the graph is the statistic of the group of the race, that which group have the higher percent of diagnosed with diabetes. So the American, Indian, Native American, they have the higher percent, about like 50%, and the Asian, they have about 9%, Hispanics have about 12%, Black have about 12%, and then the whites have about 7%. So from all these groups, Native American, they have the highest chance of diagnosed with diabetes. So the sign and symptom for type 1 and type 2, they are very similar. For example, like you will feel very hungry or thirsty, or you will urinating often, like going bathroom often, or fatigued, like very tired, and then the blurred vision. And then there is one particular sign that for the type 1 is that unintended weight loss, like you will lose weight even though you're eating regularly everything you're supposed to eat, but still you keep losing weight. And then the type 2 is that you feel tingling, numbing in your hand or feet. And then for type 3, it happened during pregnancy, like you have a high blood sugar. And also I noticed that the stress had huge impact on our body too. So how you can find out if you have a diabetes or not, like you have to get blood test or urine test. And then for the treatment, there is no cure, but they can be managed with the help of medicine, with the help of lifestyle changing. So for the type 1, they usually get insulin injection. And for type 2, they take medicine, metformin. And especially for type 2, they can be managed. You can like it's not that complicated. Like you can have a less severe, but both of them you have to monitor their blood sugar level. And for the type 2, the life changing that if you eat healthy and exercising, that can lead to remission. So healthcare profession that people with diabetes, they visit the doctor like profession for the health. So for the primary care physician, they get monitor or checkup from the blood test. And then for the endocrinologist, that is specialized for pancreas disease. And for ophthalmologist, that is the eye doctor that you check for potentially serious conditions such as cataract, glaucoma, diabetes retinopathy, diabetes macular edema, and for nephrology, it's related with kidney disease, podiatric, that relate with vascular disease, blood flow or nerve damage. And then for the physical trainer, and in another word, it's exercise physiology that help you to manage your weight healthy and control your blood sugar level, and dietitian that help you to find a right diet that match with you to manage the diabetes. And then these are the salary, how much they earn, and their location. You can find them in the hospital, clinic, or urgent care, emergency room, or private practice office. So there are so many organizations that support or promote diabetes, like help people with them. So there are three main. The first one is American Diabetes Association that was founded in 1939, and the headquarters is in Virginia. And basically this organization is to help to fund research to find cure, manage, or prevent diabetes. They also provide service and information to many communities all over USA. And then the second organization is Juvenile, Diabetes Research Foundation that was founded in 1970, headquartered in New York. So that is a very powerful for orientation for fundraising, to provide donation or fundraising, to provide fund to support their research on diabetes, or advocating for the government to support and expand the access for treatment, and providing a support network for millions of people around the world, especially this focus on type 1. And the third one is taking control of your diabetes. That is to educate. That was found in 1995. That they want to motivate people to be proactive about their condition through education for the patient, and also it helps the medical professional who cares about the patient with diabetes too. With this, educate people. And then for this research, I interviewed 2 different people for their experience growing up with being having diabetes. So this person Kay, she is like 50 now. Before diagnosed with diabetes, she had paralysis, that the stomach nerve that was damaged. So she had to get gallbladder removed when she was 21. And that was the first laparoscopy surgery in Rochester back then. And that was the first surgery that ever happened in the Rochester. So after that, she faced a lot of complications for many years. And then after a few years later, in December 2010, she was diagnosed with diabetes during her first quarter at RICT. because she was teaching children. She was very stressed. So one day she went to doctor. She thought that she had UTI, but over there she found out that her blood sugar was super high, about like 600, which was not safe for her health. So the doctor gave her metformin, but it failed. It didn't work out for her because she was allergic to it. So after a few years later, finally she started taking for the other medicine that she was not allergic to, and then every week she get injection too. And then it is also a family generation, especially from her mom and grandma's side. She got it from from mom's side. And then for her meal plan, it's very not good. Like she will skip breakfast. For the lunch, she will eat something light because she had like no time to cook or to eat because she's teaching children. So she mostly invests most of her time for the student. And then for the dinner, that time she will have a lot like huge meal like just during dinner time. And then she just started meditation and it seemed like it helping her, but during summer she had more time of being active, going out for a walk or something. But now she teaching, so she had like no time for like to go out for a walk, something like that. And she'd been like busy with during special academic year, so it make it harder for her to take care of her health. So the person M is he's 21, and before diagnosed with diabetes, he was feeling very tired, lazy, heaviness. He will like or urine often, like every 5 minutes, and he eat a lot of carb, like about 400. Like he eat pizza, pasta, ice cream, like he eat anything. And then he was diagnosed last year, summer 2020. That was the first time he was diagnosed with diabetes when he was taken to ER. So his blood test was super high that it could lead to coma or heart attack, something like that. And then so now he got somehow, so like he have to take medicine Homolock, like for 30 minutes, eat 30 minutes before each meal. And also he have to do the finger inject to monitor his sugar level. And also he is athlete, like sports person, so he played basketball, baseball, swim, so that is the best way to break down those carbs. So like for now, like before he used to eat like 400 carbs, but now he is required to eat 60 to 100 carbs. So it's like huge shame for him. And then he had no family generation diabetes, like not from his mom, but maybe from his dad's side. And he had been busy with academic life. He's a student, so it's hard for him to take care of his health too.
Feeza, you need to wrap it up. We've got a few minutes left for questions and answers. So can you summarize and bring it to a close?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. So for my personal experience, my parents they both had diabetes, so it's kind of like me and my sister, we have a high chance of developing diabetes. So during pandemic, we ate a lot. So like, you know, a lot of people, they gained weight during pandemic. So it was like everyone was home to all that. So I gained a lot of weight. And then last summer, like this summer, 2021, that's when I started eating healthy. So like now I'm like in normal state now. And then for this project, my goal is that I want to work in the actual like lab research, the real one, like actual like diabetes lab research. And then from this project, I learned so many things that I didn't know. And then this is reference like from where I got information. And then thank you.
That was great. That was a great survey of the whole field, and I can well imagine that you learned a lot from it. I have a couple of questions, one medical more and one more to do with your survey. So I know that pancreatic cancer is a very serious form of cancer. I'm wondering if there's a relationship between diabetes type 1 and pancreatic cancer, because they both are to do with the pancreas, right? So is there a relationship, do you know?
No, I still need to do some research and try.
That's okay. That's okay. It was a question from left field, but you were talking about the pancreas, so I wondered if you also had followed up on that. That might be an interesting field of research, right? I mean, they're both to do with the pancreas. Any case, so then you found two very interesting subjects for your interviews. How did you find your two interview subjects?
I found them through my mentor. Like, she knows someone, so she told me about them. Like, one is professor, like for whole life, and the second is a student. It just happened like last year, so it's a huge life changing for him right now.
I see. Who was your mentor?
Sarah. I don't know how to pronounce last name. It's
Sashay.
George. Yeah.
Sashay. Right. So that is, and so she worked with you a lot, right? I mean, she helped you help direct your project. So that is a very good example of an excellent use of a mentor. So I'm pleased to see that. Like I said, I thought that was a very comprehensive review of the field, and I am pretty confident that you're going to find a position quite easily in that field, given the background knowledge that you've already accumulated. So now I'm going to turn it over to Meg and see if she has any questions.
Thanks, Stephen. Feeza, I thought you did a really nice job, and I think comprehensive is a great word to describe the whole presentation that you provided along with the visuals. So it was a really nice job. My question has to do with technology, and I'm wondering if you explored any of this when you were doing your research on diabetes. And, I know that we've come a long way, and as all of us in this Zoom room can attest to, we use our phones for everything. And I know now that individuals or patients with diabetes can monitor their levels through a port that looks like a sticker, just holding their phone to it. Which I think is a great example of ways in which we can use technology to help manage some of our chronic diseases. I'm wondering, did you find that the use of technology has improved outcomes? I know there's not a cure for diabetes, but has it improved outcomes for people managing diabetes? And I'm done.
Yeah. So that one, I forgot to mention that one of the person that I interviewed, person K, she had that the patch thing, and then it connects to her phone. She download app, and then for her perspective, she told me that it make her life so much easier because she can track everything, and also she can look at all history too. Just like she had everything on her phone, so it did make her like a lot easier for her.
And I would imagine it reduces, at least if this is, I actually haven't seen children with the patch. I hope that they're able to utilize something like that, because I would imagine, the potential that you have to continually stick a child throughout the day to help them manage their diabetes would be counterproductive, right? They would probably avoid that and then maybe not manage their disease like they should. So I hope as part of your continuous research, our improvements with technology make things better. But I really enjoyed that. Really nice job. And we've got a couple other visitors. So, and I'll also give Nick a chance to ask a question if anyone else has a question out there.
I had one quick question. So going back to, I think one of the first slides you put up, it was showing the amount of diagnoses, I don't know the plural of it, but of the Native Americans, and I believe it was Alaskan Americans, being higher at risk for diabetes than the other people on there. And I was wondering, do you know why specifically that group has a higher chance of getting this disease?
No, I don't know why, but that's a really good question.
Okay.
I was going to ask a similar question, but from the other side, because on that same slide, it seems like white Americans have the least chance of contracting diabetes. So I was going to ask you the same question. Do you have any notion of why that might be? I mean, you know, I can't imagine. I mean, I suppose it could be genetic, but I don't know that. That's another area that you might want to research.
Yeah, like one thing I know that for the white, they have a lot of type 1, especially with the children. That what I just learned just right. I was doing some research.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Great job.
Really nice job, actually, both of you.
Really enjoyed that.
And I guess I would just reiterate that if you don't want us to keep the recordings, then just email me following the presentation today or at any point. It takes us a little bit of time to get them up and captioned. So you've got a little bit of time if you want to think on it. And just as a reminder, the Capstone Symposium is December 2nd in the Magic Spell Studios building. And also don't forget you have 2 papers, reflection and a product paper that both can be submitted to the same Dropbox in the assignments folder in my courses. And we're really looking forward to the symposium. And for the 2 of you, as you wrap things up, just congratulations, you did a great job. Stephen, is there anything else you want to add?
I do. I've been meaning to make this point across the other sessions. Last semester, I had to be the heavy. I had to be the one that said, you know, you've got 2 papers, don't forget. And now somehow, and I didn't even ask, Meg has taken on that role. So thank you, Meg. It's great that you're willing to do it.
Yes, and thank you, Kelsey, who was another SOI student, Kelsey Ennis, who attended and put a nice message in the chat to both of you about the great job that you did. So great job wrapping things up and the successful completion of your semester, and stay safe. And thanks again, Michelle, for attending.
And thanks
Absolutely,
to the
great job,
interpreter
guys. It was
also.
enjoyable.
Thanks also
Thank you.
to the interpreter.
Yes, thank you so much, Todd. Bye-bye, folks.
All right.
Bye-bye,
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.